seconds.
Yeah.
Hello, we
Hello.
are live again. We are glad to have you here with us, Marina.
Thank you.
So, it's first time you are present on Coaching and Mentoring Festival,
I am. Yes.
and it is a special topic about emotions.
Mm.
So, can you tell us couple of sentences about you first?
Yeah. So my name is Marina, and I have a private psychotherapy practice, and I also have a mental health education business. So I come from a business background myself. I've kind of decided to become a therapist at the age of 30, which was almost 10 years ago. And since then, kind of most of my interest, I guess, is in working with various trauma. And also, I'm a parent myself, so I work a lot with parents, just helping them and supporting them throughout different parenting challenges and helping them to um, really, learn some new tools that helps them to support themselves and their families in a different way. So that's my work, and that's my passion as well.
Great. Thank you very much. And the subject for today it's part of important thing for us, and I have a challenging question for you.
Mm.
How can we understand and recognize our emotion? I think
Mm.
it's a very relevant topic for each of us.
Mm. Mm. And that's a very good question, and I guess the answer would be it depends. It depends on what you've learned while growing up, right? Because I think I can talk about my own experiences. I think if we, as just or I, if we grow up in a families where certain feelings or certain emotions are not welcome or are not recognized, or we know that we are not allowed to express them, then that will have an effect on how we feel about expressing those emotions. So we learn in a family where, for example, the message is that you know girls need to be good and they can't be angry. Then one of the message that we're going to learn that I can't be angry because I need to be good, and girls don't get angry. So that's just one of the examples, and that will be really tricky to recognize those feelings. So I guess to answer that question is really, I guess for me, it's to start reflecting back on how was that for me as a child. What feelings was I allowed to talk about, what feelings I wasn't allowed to talk about, what were responses around me as I felt. And in this case, my webinar is related to anger. What response would I get as I was feeling angry? Or could I even name that feeling? Could people around me name that feeling? And I guess that would kind of start giving some ideas, or like a sense of unpicking that, because that's quite a big question you've asked, I think. And I don't really know if I'm able to give an answer, but I think just starting to reflecting back on what did
Mhm.
we when we were growing up is a big step in trying to understand the emotions.
Yeah, and this is something relevant for coaches, mentors, and also becoming aware, not only reflecting, but becoming aware of how yourself feel.
Mm.
It's not so easy.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of models out there from certain models with few emotions as a
Mhm.
basic emotions,
Mm,
and then it's like in our background pictures a lot of combination that give I don't know how many, but I think I seen more than 20 or 50 kind of emotions in some models.
mm,
And maybe there is an interesting question about, do we have good emotions and bad emotions, or we just have emotions?
mm. I mean, there are a lot of models. As you say, I speak about my beliefs, and and how I work. I don't see, well, actually, I don't see anything as good or bad. I don't see feelings as good or bad, or I don't see people as good or bad. So I guess my approach is different. Specifically to anger, very often people do identify anger as like a negative feeling, because for many people anger is very often associated with harm. And by harm I mean that goes back to what we were just started the conversation with, that anger is very often linked to losing the sense of safety if anger is being expressed around you, or what can happen if someone gets angry, because then it becomes something around an expression, like sense of that can lead to violence sometimes. So it becomes quite a negative outcomes of anger that is really damaging and very difficult to control. And that I think is something that for many people makes anger negative or dangerous to express, is that idea that anger is so damaging that controlling anger is almost like impossible. It's like controlling an explosion. So I think in that way, that thinking about anger can be quite terrifying. It's not safe, and if it's not safe, it's quite natural that many people are going to avoid it, in many different ways, either by not allowing to feel it, or either by, for example, avoiding people who feel angry. And that is like a very specific expression of anger that again they've learned, for example, as they grow up or in
Mhm.
their.
Okay.
Yeah, I answered the question, but I guess that's.
Hmm. So actually, I don't know how in your culture it's about anger, but I can see, at least in Romania, we used to say, you have too much anger, or you never get anger.
Mm,
And I think the normal it's clear in between.
mm,
And I try to think what are the ways to address anger for each of us. So it could be coaching, it could be mentoring, it could be therapy. How can we choose, or how can we address anger in a healthy way? Because actually this is the topic of our discussion.
mm. Yeah, and I think there, I guess, several steps, or there are several things that came to my mind as you were asking the question. And first, to, I guess, separate anger as just a normal feeling among other feelings. And all feelings have a problem solving function. We have a feeling for a reason. Like if you think about a baby, a newborn, they're born with all the variety of feelings. And they cry when they're hungry, they cry when they're scared, they cry when they're like overwhelmed or angry or whatever. And this is all like a normal. normal feelings that they were born with, right? And I think the first step, I guess, in kind of unpicking this is just to recognize anger as a normal feeling that has a problem solving function. So when I feel angry, it just means that my nervous system experiences something externally as a disturbance to my sense of safety, comfort, and it's quite like a minor disturbance in that way, because anger, if you think about the window of tolerance, you know, the idea of window of tolerance, that anger as a feeling is very much inside the window of tolerance, so it's a minor disturbance. And if you kind of offer that solution to that problem in here and now, then the anger is going to be processed and, you know, digested in a very normal, I don't like to use the word healthy because I don't really know what it means, but in a way that the nervous system is just going to not get overwhelmed, because the problem is solved and anger is resolved like in 5 to 10 minutes. That's done. But if
Mhm.
the anger is not, the need behind anger is not resolved, then anger can turn into something else. So it can turn into resentment, you know, and can turn into rage. And then that is a very different feeling. So anger is a feeling that all of us start to develop as we are like anytime from 18 months old, when children start to feel that they can be separate from their parents. You know, they're starting to walk, they're starting to experiment with their power, they're starting to have like they start to understand that we can dislike some things that parents tell us, or we want to test our boundary, and this is where we're starting to feel anger. So this is like something about how we can be separate and yet connected. So in that way, it's something about the idea of spacious intimacy with anger. So it's about I can be different and be close to you in the relationship. And I think this is quite, I guess, an important distinction of anger, for example, with rage. Because
Mhm.
it's completely outside of window of tolerance. And this is where the harm is. This is where isolation, lack of control, lots of damage, fear, and you know, all of that.
Okay. So this is somehow uh, brings to the umbrella of festival and
Mm,
understanding what is behind and what are the bound. I hope I use boundaries as distinction. So like what is anger, how
mm,
it's different from calm,
mm,
how it's different from rage, and how you can recognize it and understand triggers and so on. This is one step, isn't it?
mm. Yeah, yeah. It's how would you describe a feeling when you feel like a minor disturbance in
Hmm.
your, you know, for example, as now we're talking, if someone would walk in the room in my office, then I would have that minor disturbance. It wouldn't overwhelm me, but I would be like angry because I would, you
Hmm.
know, this is time, you know, my work
Yeah.
time. I don't want to be interrupted. But then if I would communicate it, then the problem would be resolved. Then I would move on.
Mhm.
So that's a,
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Then I'm thinking on about anger, like, and you can tell me if I'm right or if it's a different way to better to see it. I can be on myself.
mm-hmm,
I can be anger on the other people,
mm-hmm,
or I can be anger on I don't know, events or things that are happening in certain way.
Hmm.
Is this a good distinction of the anger
Mm,
regarding anger, or
I
not
guess
necessary? It's the same anger.
I guess the distinction between anger and rage, for example, that anger is a problem, has a problem solving function.
Mm-hmm.
If you're angry that something happened, or if you're angry that someone is doing things that you don't appreciate, and you use the anger as an energy to make a request or to change something in your actions or to make a new decision that will help you to support yourself in a better way, or whatever else you can use that energy for, that anger gives you, then that is going to be a resolution to the
Mm-hmm.
anger. And then that will allow anger. So it's basically a signal of a nervous system. There is something happening, be curious, pay attention, and
Mm-hmm.
then use that energy to communicate a demand, or or to have a conversation, or to come out of the situation, whatever there are a lot of options, but the point is something is changing, and then anger gets resolved. If
Mm-hmm.
you hold it, if the anger is held, and then it becomes a pattern, it becomes a coping strategy because of that historical learning that we can have from early on, then anger can turn into rage. And rage is different because rage is a trauma response,
Mm-hmm.
something that is like a developmentally, it's a processing difficulty. So when we feel rage, it's not because we're angry, it's because we have a processing difficulty and we feel lost, helpless, and we don't know how to resolve. There's no resolution because we haven't learned a supportive coping strategy to deal in that moment with whatever the task is. It hasn't been
Mm-hmm.
the development, it has been a developmental task that we were not able to get. For example, there was no one there, or it was like unwelcome, or for whatever reason it hasn't been learned. So it's like it's a processing difficulty.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I can imagine to one relevant dimension, the time. I can be anger on something that happened in the past,
Hmm.
and I my anger is triggered about remember that thing.
That wouldn't be
I
anger. That if anger is in here and now,
okay,
if we're talking from something that has been in the past, something that we've been carrying for a long time, that wouldn't be anger.
okay.
You can you cannot resolve what happened in the past and here now. You can unpick it, you can digest it in a different way, you can reflect on it, you can understand how can I change if, for example, I'm going to go through a similar experience now, but yet we cannot change it. So we can have, I don't know, we can grieve what happened in the past, or we can be in touch with a sense of loss, or we can feel anger in here and now. But then the problem is going to be, what do I need to have in here and now to resolve how I feel now?
Hmm. But sometimes I get anger now just thinking on what is going to happen.
You're angry at the future.
Yeah,
Mm.
I I'm going to have to solve some issues at public administration, and the service is so bad and my experience is so bad that I get angry about thinking I have to deal with that.
Mm. And it sounds like that would be a very familiar pattern.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that's, I guess, a difference. If it's a familiar pattern, there is no solution in a moment. that
Hmm.
would not be only anger. Anger is, it's really about, I feel angry. What do I, how can I solve it?
Hmm. Okay.
As
So we are near to finish our short conversation. Maybe we'll develop and we'll have the chance to meet each other around also anger or maybe other emotions. Anything that you consider it's relevant for us to have in mind about anger and how we can use it to improve our relationships.
I think, anger has a lot of many positive elements. As I've said, anger is like the start of that individuation process that all of us go through. So anger is about how can we be separate and at the same time be connected to someone else. So it's not about symbiotic relationships. It's really about an autonomy, right? If I'm autonomous, I'm allowed to have all my needs, I'm allowed to have all my feelings, and and I know how to communicate them, and I know how to get my needs met. And obviously it's impossible to do it 100% of time, but it's something that is a permission to have all of those needs. And I think this is a positive aspect of anger, is really about that, that it's okay to communicate your own needs. It's okay to listen to yourself, to be curious, and to recognize what problem do I want to solve for myself in this moment, and really to develop the support system and the internal support system that will help to make those changes, and sometimes to not feel stuck, or to feel like there is no change possible, or there is no power, or whatever it is, where people often feel that they are unable to change. So it's something about how it's connected to the system of discounting that we have, that a lot of people have. It's almost like if there is anger, there is energy to make a change.
Hmm. Okay, great.
Mm.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for asking the questions and for having me.
Yeah, it was a pleasure,
Thank
and I hope to find other opportunities to talk more about it.
Yeah, yeah,
And
and I'm doing a work.
wish yeah,
I
wishing
just
you best for the workshop, and you can tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I'm doing a workshop on November 17th, that is about anger and the ways to use anger, and we're just going to explore different ways to express it. We're going to explore how to use anger in the relationships, how to use anger to allow yourself to be assertive, and to pursue the things that you want to have. So if you're interested, please, there's still time to register. And yeah, I don't know if they're going to be like my contacts, but yeah, please come to the workshop to talk about this. And I promise it is going to be very interesting. It's going to be exciting.
Okay. Thank you very much. Best
Thank
wishes. Have a
you.
great week.
And you too. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye. Bye.